Good evening. Welcome to the October 19th, 2020 meeting of the Stillwater City Council. I will at this time call the meeting to order, and I'll ask you to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. We're going to start off our agenda tonight with some proclamations. First up, we're going to have a proclamation in recognition of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And we have, I think, Mark Howard here from the Wings of Hope. I'm going to go ahead and read this proclamation, then I'll bring a copy of it down to you. Whereas the City of Stillwater encourages positive action on the part of the community in Stillwater by supporting Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and whereas Domestic Violence Awareness Month is designed to support victims of domestic violence in their time of greatest need, and whereas approximately 3 American women each day lose their lives as a result of domestic violence, and whereas unhealthy relationships can have lifelong negative impact on personal health, and whereas we can break the cycle of domestic violence before it starts by speaking out against and bringing awareness to domestic violence, and whereas by equipping families with skills for healthy relationships such as negotiation and compromise, we may break the cycle of abuse. And whereas Domestic Violence Awareness Month encourages positive action by offering survivors and families the motivation to help them discover the power of self-respect and self-esteem, positively influencing attitudes and beliefs that will affect how they are treated and how they treat others. And whereas parents, community leaders, civic organizations, and schools are an integral part of providing safe, healthy, and positive support systems for survivors. And whereas assisting survivors is not just an investment in their future, it's an investment in Stillwater, Oklahoma for generations to come. And whereas we recognize the need to help domestic violence survivors in Stillwater to choose to break the cycle of violence. Now, therefore, I, William Joyce, Mayor of the City of Stillwater, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2020 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Mr. Howard, do you have comments, or would you like to say anything?
Sure, if you don't mind.
Please.
Well, Mayor and the City Council, thank you so much for your leadership, for this proclamation, and for all that you do for domestic violence. And quite honestly, all you do for our community. I, for one, and Wings of Hope are grateful for your leadership, especially during this pandemic time, because it has made life difficult for victims of domestic violence. And thank you so much for taking a stand against this. And we offer our thoughts and prayers are with you, and also for the victims of domestic violence. Just a few weeks ago, we had 7 women in the shelter, but we also had 19 children. And so they too are often the unseen victims of what takes place. So we are grateful to you and the City Council for this proclamation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all that you and your staff at Wings of Hope do. It's a tremendous resource for our community here in Stillwater, and we want to do everything we can to help. I'll bring you a copy of this. Take a quick picture here. Thanks. All right, next up we have recognition of developers who have revitalized homes and properties here in Stillwater, and Paula is going to give us a presentation here on these.
Yes, thank you. As soon as the slide gets up on the screen, we have some before and after pictures of 2 homes here in Stillwater. So the property at 112 South Melrose, David Lukenmeyer revitalized it. And then the property I'll show at 164 South Kings, Steve Pebworth revitalized it. Both of the gentlemen are here this evening. So this was how the house looked when David acquired it. And I appreciate both gentlemen sending in these before and after pictures. So it's rather fantastic that some of the older homes here in Stillwater, somebody puts the money and time and effort and love into them. So the houses need to be loved. So 164 South Kings. Couldn't even see the house. I was fascinated when I got this picture. I searched for it for a while. And I don't know, we often applaud here in council chambers, but the work that these gentlemen have done on these properties, I think it deserves a round.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for showing us the photos, and we appreciate both Mr. Lukemeyer and Mr. Pebsworth for the work they've done and for being here tonight so that we can recognize you all. I have a certificate of appreciation for both of you. And we do want to just recognize the fact that there are these properties like this here in Stillwater that just need a little time and effort and money spent on them, and we appreciate you both for doing that. So I'll bring these down to you. Okay, that takes us to item 4, the consent docket. On the consent tonight, we have meeting minutes, the Sherrar History Quarterly Report, and a final plat for the Sticks. Counselors, questions, comments, or anything you'd like to remove from the consent docket? Or perhaps a motion?
Motion to approve the consent docket. Second.
I think I heard a second. Did I hear a second? I have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington?
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti?
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake?
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. Item 5 is public comment on items not scheduled for public hearing. We do have one person signed up, I think remotely, to speak on this on an agenda topic. Elizabeth Hurlbut. There you are. Thank you for being here. Just a reminder, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think you're muted.
There. Okay.
There you are.
Sorry. Okay. My name is Elizabeth Hurlbut, and my husband and I and our family were new to Stillwater. We moved here in May. And I think just what I really wanted to get on here and say is that, first of all, we're really excited to be here. We moved here with the intention of starting a business, which we did. We have a boutique in on Campus Corner. It's called Emma Kate & Co. And, you know, we had a store in Enid, which is where we moved from. And we had these great intentions of COVID going away and having game days and just having a really great store in Stillwater. And unfortunately, COVID hasn't gone away, and everything at the OSU campus is kind of just keep shutting down one at a time, and games are being postponed, and you know, they can't tailgate, which is, you know, kind of big for businesses in the Campus Corner area and, you know, all around Stillwater. But I think my main thought is, you know, I just want you guys to be aware that, you know, my business, we're only new, we're struggling, we're hurting, and we need something. And I just kind of feel like, you know, we've been doing everything you've asked. We were wearing masks, we're we're having our customers wear masks. And I just feel like maybe our businesses need a bone to be thrown to us because we're hurting. There's nowhere for people to go, and they're not shopping in Stillwater, I don't feel like, because maybe they're unhappy with the mask mandates, or maybe they just feel like there's nowhere for them to go to buy anything. I don't know. I just wanted to let you guys know how my business is doing, and it's not doing good. And it's really depressing. I feel like I'm dying from COVID and I don't even have COVID. I feel like I'm getting depressed. And this isn't the way it should be. I just kind of hope that you guys can do something to help the businesses in our community here. I've applied for the small business loan through the Small Business Association, the disaster relief, and I received a small one in the spring. And, here we are. It's almost harder to have our stores open full time because we have to stock now for fall and winter. But I still have all my stock from the summer that never got sold. And I just kind of feel like I'm just putting myself farther and farther in the hole. And I don't know if there's any way to get out of it. And I just am begging that the city do something to help our small businesses, that it's not our fault, and I'm doing everything I feel like I can do, and I just don't know what else to do. So I don't know. I feel like as our numbers go down, just please remember that we were depending on game days, and for some of our businesses down there, that's what people depend on. They depend on the game days to get them throughout the rest of the year, and they don't have that anymore. And businesses that have been in business for years, some right around me are looking like they may not make it. So I just am begging you guys to help us and keep us in business, and throw us a bone, give us tailgating back or something. I don't know. Bring the people back. That's all.
Well, thank you for being here, Elizabeth. We appreciate you and your family coming to Stillwater and opening your business. And I know it's been a really difficult time for you and for many here in the community. We do have an item on the agenda tonight to discuss funding small business grants through the.
I think that's where I thought. That's where I thought I was speaking.
Yeah, well,
So,
it's not a
sorry.
public hearing, so we have this section of the agenda where you get to speak about that, but we will be addressing that here in just a little bit. And I certainly understand the need for this kind of assistance. And again, we appreciate you being here and for your commitment to the community of Stillwater as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now move to item 7, public hearings. Item 7A is to receive public comment regarding a request for the closing of easements at 1004, 1010, 1014, 1108, 1116, 1122, and 1204 East Swim Avenue. This is CC-20-163. And I think, Lance, you're here to speak about this item. Lance, do you know if we had good notice on this item? Good notice. All right, Lance, let us know what's going on.
Okay. Lance Gross, Community Development Planning Manager. Let's see, there's a lot of information within the staff report that I'll try not to repeat, and easements don't typically come along very often, so I'll explain briefly the process. Closings do not go to Planning Commission. Applications are submitted to staff and presented to City Council. And for public notice, we advertise in the newspaper and we send out letters to all the property owners within a 300-foot radius. And we also contact the other utilities to get their input. The red hatch pattern on the map indicates the 20-foot easement in question. As you can see, it's right on the south side of Lakeview, and this is just to the east of Perkins. On the map, you'll see the green highlighted area. That's the actual 20-foot easement, and the orange portion is the 2-foot easement requesting to be closed. This is a little closer view looking at the lots. There are 4 on the left-hand side and 3 on the right-hand side. And the one here in the center came before you as a closing request back in July. And this is a little close-up looking at the 20-foot easement. And there are 3 utilities currently within this easement. Electric is right in the center. Gas and cable are located on the northern half. They're all underground utilities, and the 2-foot portion requested to be closed is located on the southern portion of the 20-foot easement. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lance. Councilors, any questions for Lance?
Lance, I'm sorry. Could you show that slide again that shows the whole row of homes?
Sure.
The one right before that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the orange is the 2-foot encroachment,
That is correct.
and we already vacated lot number 5,
Yes, that is correct.
and 9, 10, 11, and 12 are not affected.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Lance, how far away from that 2-foot proposed closing is the first, was it an electrical line that you said was closest to the houses?
Yes, that is correct. It's
What's that separate? Oh, so 8 feet. That leaves 8 feet of separation.
mhm.
Lance, is the 20-foot wide easement required under the zoning? Is it required under the building code? Why is there a 20-foot easement required in the first place?
It's part of the ordinance, and any easement that has more than one utility requires at least 20 feet. Yeah, a single utility only requires 15.
Are there? Do you know if there's any future possibility or plan that any additional utilities would need to use that easement?
Not that we know of. What's kind of fortunate about this location is there is a water line which is within the right-of-way of Lakeview up here, and then a sanitary sewer line that serves all these houses. It's right adjacent to Swim within that right-of-way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And Lance, at this time, there's no concerns from the electric or the gas utilities about closing this?
That is correct. We received comments from both of them, and they had no issues.
Lance, when you receive comments from utilities like that, are those written comments?
Yes, they are. Yes.
I have a question about the second bullet that explains that the 7 homes are within the setback and they will obtain a variance. That's a different issue than the easement, correct?
That is correct. The houses do encroach within the setback for all 7. It's the same setback, a 20-foot setback. And they'll have to go before the Board of Adjustment for those.
What's the worst thing that could happen, Lance?
The worst case scenario?
Mm-hmm.
Well, probably if you really look at it from that standpoint, tearing down, the backside of the houses. I believe they encroach right now 1.1 feet.
Well, I mean, what would precipitate that?
How would we get to that point? That's a great question. I'm not really certain. Maybe that's a legal question?
Yes, this is Bethany Childs. The only thing really that would precipitate it is if the utilities that have the right to utilize it would come back in and say, "Oh, we have this, we need to use it." But if it's closed, then that's not an issue. So, one thing that I will tell you is there are a couple of things that I would advise you. And that is, even if you decline, say, to grant the closures at this juncture, they can always go straight to the district court, file what's called a district court vacation action. So I just think it's important for the council to understand all of this.
Thank you, Beth Ann. Councilors, any further questions for Lance? Go ahead, Norman.
No, but I have a question for Beth Ann related to that.
Go ahead.
When you mentioned district court, I did chat with Mr. Carnley this morning, and he said that they have gone to the district court to have the vacations, if they are actually granted, included in the title of the properties to protect future homeowners. Is that typical?
Yes, ma'am. And actually how there are basically two different processes that are utilized to close or close easements. One of them is the council adopts an ordinance, which of course would be the next step. And then they're going to go to the district court, file what's called a district court foreclosure action. So they will foreclose the city's right to reopen the easements. So there will be a second step associated with this. I was simply advising the council that even if you don't, you go forward with this, that there is always an option for the developer to take it directly to what's called an easement vacation action.
Is there an advantage to the developer then? Coming before council with it? Does our action add anything to that?
Frankly, I think it's a very respectful thing to do because it's the city's easement. So as attorney for the council in this particular venture, I think it cuts down on your legal costs, first of all. And secondarily, I think it gives staff an opportunity to thoughtfully work with the developer, but more importantly, utility. So not only is it respectful, I think that it's a more accepted, proper way for the developer to do it.
Any further questions, councilors? This time I will open the public hearing. I think we have a representative from the developer here, and I think, is Jimbo also online? I thought I saw him earlier. Oh, okay.
I think he's on. I think he's having trouble.
We'll let Stephen give it a shot first.
I think I've seen most of
I thought I did too.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Stephen Gose with Gose and Associates, 113 East 8th, here on behalf of Freedom Homes. Also in the audience is Josh Carnley here on behalf of Freedom Homes. So Lance covered everything pretty well. We were here again in July asking for a similar thing on Lot 5. Really, I think one point of clarification, this came up because of Lot 8, 1204 East Swim. During the closing process, they ordered a survey. They noticed the encroachment of 1.1 feet. So that's the house that we know of that encroaches in addition to the Lot 5 house. We made a decision to go ahead and close, just seek the vacation on 1 through 8 so that it was a uniform easement width. And no other issues have come up in closing relative to this, but we've figured just out of consistency, instead of having a jagged easement, let's go straight. We presented in July that the question was, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? This slab was actually poured in June, so prior to that July meeting. Since then, Jimbo and Josh have had the houses surveyed on the lot prior to digging the footings and the foundations, so to try to ensure that this won't happen again. So this construction happened after that July meeting, Sorry, let me take that back. This construction happened prior to the July meeting, so there have been steps taken since then to stop this from happening. So, are there any questions for Josh or I?
Councilors, any questions?
Peter, could you outline the steps that were taken since July?
So they have had a surveyor stake the lot pin or the proper building corners based on the property corners and the setbacks. And so he's going out there and setting pins that then the slab, the guy building the slab has to measure off of and to set his form line. So they've really narrowed the box down to keep the slab where it needs to be.
So that was an additional survey?
Yes, it's a survey that's being done prior to the construction of the foundations.
How was it being handled before?
Tape measure and measuring off curbs.
Okay.
And in this specific case, there's a 1 foot jog in the street. And so it's 1 foot, it encroaches in the back easement and setback 1 foot, and it's away from the front setback a foot further into the property. So there's an extra foot in the front and minus a foot in the back. And we did get Board of Adjustment approval on the encroachment for the building setback a few weeks ago.
On just one lot?
On just lot 8, yes. 1204 East Swim.
Stephen, does the decision tonight then take care of the entire subdivision then at this point?
Yeah, that's why we did 1 through 8. Just again, there's no known issues in those lots other than 5 and 8, but we just, for consistency, instead of having a zigzag easement.
Sure. Okay.
And there's nothing in 9, 10, 11, and 12?
There are houses being constructed and permitted and constructed, and those ones have been surveyed to stay away from the setbacks. Lot 12 is under construction right now.
How about the easements?
The
All
easement and the
easements.
setback, yeah. In the back of
No
these,
encroachment.
right. In the back of these, it's
And
a
they're
20
the same.
Yeah.
Councilors, any further questions? Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
Do all the homeowners or home buyers know that this is an issue?
The ones that it affects, where there are
Josh is
encroachments,
shaking
they
his
do
head.
know about them.
Okay. And having the vacation in the title will inform future homeowners?
Yes, and anytime there's a survey done and an abstract pulled, it will reflect the smaller easement. And the Board of Adjustment action for the encroachment into the building setback gets recorded in those titles as well.
Just as a matter of course?
Yes. Yeah,
Mr.
we've
Conley
gotten
didn't
the
have
action.
to make an extra effort to do that.
Well, the city, like for the Board of Adjustment, those approvals have been provided to Freedom Homes, and they are getting them to the title company to include in the closing documents.
Thank you, Stephen. This time I'll close the public hearing. We don't have anyone else signed up to speak, and I'll ask Lance to come up and provide us with staff recommendations. Or at least the alternatives, I suppose.
Yes, there are 3. Let's see, you can approve the closing as presented, or you can approve the closing and require the developer to relocate utilities to maintain current separation, Or you can deny the request and require the developer to remove the encroachment of each structure.
Does staff have a specific recommendation here?
We've just provided options or alternatives.
Thank you. Counselors, discussion? Motions?
I'm wondering if Beth Ann could repeat her distinction between the city, between the council and approving the vacation and just going straight to district court.
Absolutely. And one thing that, the reason that I mentioned that to you all, because I just think that you should be aware of the fact that even if you deny the request tonight, that the likelihood of them filing a vacation action is probably 100% rather than tearing out the buildings. Secondarily, the other thing that I would mention is because there is still an 8-foot separation between the structure and the utility itself, I think that the city's objection would likely be overruled by the district court. You know, this actually is not too terribly unusual. I've dealt with situations where you've had structures actually built, say, over the sanitary sewer line, and that's not the case. The other thing that I will say is I did meet with the developer and the engineers, and they indicated to me that they're measuring twice and cutting once from here on out. So I think that's positive as well.
Thank you very much.
Is there a motion on this item?
Motion to close the requested southern 2 feet of the 20-foot utility easement on properties addressed that were discussed this evening.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the requested easement closing on 1004, 1010, 1014, 1108, 1116, 1122, and 1204 East Swim Avenue. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington,
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti,
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake,
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the requested easement closing is approved. Thank you all for being here. All right, that takes us to item 8, general orders. Item 8A is the Western Payne County Ambulance Authority Annual Report from Mr. Jerry Moeller.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Jerry Moeller, 1614 South Boulder Creek Drive, Stillwater. Also the chairman of the Western Payne County Ambulance Trust Authority, and have been on the board since its inception for 10 years. As we approach the end of our 10th year, actually it's our second 5-year term, we decided that a review of our contract would be in order. We wanted to consult with an expert as far as the compliance with our contract, also to have our service benchmarked with similar EMS services in nearby communities. So we contacted Steve Athey, Healthcare Visions, who is indeed an expert and actually helped us begin this service 10 years ago. So we did that, and what you have in front of you is the executive summary of that report. So as you can see, our consultant reviewed lots of data, lots of reports, response times, collaborated and verified response times, quality data, financial data. He did lots of interviews. And then he did a benchmark of our service. By the way, he did it with Browns County, Texas, Creek County of Oklahoma, and a company called React, which is really the Shawnee area. The both of similar size and scope. So the summary of that summary is the very last of the conclusions of what you have in front of you, that LifeNet is in substantial compliance with their current contract and is operating within the appropriate financial and operational parameters. Some variances were noted following their review of this system, and a series of recommendations were made. These variances can and should be addressed collaboratively between Wapketa and LifeNet. This positive review should allow Wapketa and any and all options available to them as they approach the end of the existing contract, including extending the contract term without a competitive procurement process. I believe LifeNet is doing a good job. I think when we started in this community, we started with 3 trucks, 3 full-time vehicles. Now we have 5. Even though the volume has not grown that much, we have committed together to have better response times, and particularly and including getting transfers from the hospital. Those transfers from Stillwater Medical Center have grown dramatically as they've expanded their services. Thought the response to COVID was very appropriate. You know, they added extra staff early on. Little did they know that volume would drop dramatically, like it has in all healthcare facilities. And now their challenges shifted a bit. Now they need to try and keep their people healthy as COVID is more active in the community. And we've had some positives in the service in the last 4 and maybe the last couple of months. And actually the manager has it now, but he doesn't ride a truck. So we've been able to continue to provide the service that we need. With the completion of this report and the results, I will tell you that it is the intent of the trust board to extend the contract of LifeNet in May for another 5 years. I would be available for any questions.
Thank you, sir. Councilors, any questions?
Well, and Mr. Miller, thank you for all your work that you've put into this and for your service on the board. Anybody that's ever ridden an ambulance can tell you how important that service is. As a physician and director of stroke medicine over at Stillwater Medical Center, I can tell you that we certainly appreciate those services, and they seem to be providing quite a service indeed. One question I had for you, sir, was there were a couple of minor points of maybe improvement or things that were pointed out that could be reviewed for future study. Was there any specific improvement data point that was hit upon by the audit?
I will tell you there were. I've got a note here. Although not currently required, I'm going to read the recommendation. But the contract, LifeNet should be required to track and document the appropriate times for calls turned in for mutual aid providers. In other words, when our trucks are all busy, we can and do ask someone from Cushing, Pawnee, Oklahoma City to make a run for us. Often it's a transfer. He's telling us, he's requesting that we put in the contract that we track that response, that we know when it starts and know when it ends. Otherwise we just lose it. We don't know what the response has been. He asked us to report to include LifeNet staffing status, in other words, turnover data, and the reasons for turnover, and were they voluntary, involuntary, and why, and what's the rate compared to the previous year. And the last one was the need for parties to agree on a level of reporting complaints. Right now, we don't get a lot of complaints, but if there is a serious complaint, it's reported to the chairman or me. Now we're going to allow me to access their computer log, and whenever I want, I'll do that at least a couple times a year, maybe quarterly. Turns out it's a tedious process because they document the heck out of it. And then the other thing is they will provide a summary report on complaints once a year. So those were the 3 recommendations.
Nice. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry, I don't know if this is a question for you or maybe for Mr. Dorman, but can you kind of provide an overview of how the trust authority works? I mean, this isn't just a city trust, right? This is
well, it's unusual, and it's the beneficiary of this trust is both the county and the city, which is I know I've never seen anything like it, but maybe it has been. So. The county gets to appoint a member, and the city gets to appoint a member. The hospital gets to appoint a member, university, and there's one member appointed alternately between the city of Perkins and Glencoe every other term.
So it covers that whole area and serves multiple constituencies.
All of Western Payne County is what we call it. So we also cover a little bit of Noble County, and we actually get paid for that. We get paid a little bit of money from Noble County for doing that.
Thank you. Councilors, any further questions? Well, we certainly appreciate your service and the service of the board. I'm sorry, did I cut you off, Vice Mayor?
Thanks.
Okay.
No.
I would like to thank the cooperation of the city. We fund this. We fund the deficit on the ambulance service by the subscriptions from the city, $5 a month added to the utilities, and city of Stillwater collects the majority of that. Out of 1.3 million, we get $1 million from the city of Stillwater. So, without the help of those folks in the utility area, we would be in a world of hurt. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. We appreciate the update. All right, that takes us to item 8B, approve a budget amendment transferring $350,000 from the general fund to the Stillwater Economic Development Authority to fund a redevelopment agreement with Everyman LLC, contingent upon approval of the redevelopment agreement by CETA. This is where the meetings get a little convoluted tonight. We've got a lot of cross meeting approvals needed. So Melissa Reams is here to talk to us about the budget amendment.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Melissa Reams, Deputy City Manager. And the mayor summed it up very well. We have a lot of cross-entity approvals needed this evening. So before I really get into the details of the first budget amendment, I drafted out kind of a who's on first type presentation so that you can understand where monies are coming from and why we need certain authorities from our different entities. Several years ago, we entered into a transfer policy regarding the transfer from the SUA to the general fund. And our assumption is always that the general fund ends its year with a zero fund balance. And so anything that is surplus or is fund balance in the general fund, according to the transfer policy, would go back to the SUA. We are coming to you this evening with a resolution in the SUA asking for the trustees to grant the funding to the ability to stay in the general fund and to fund 2 very specific projects. So that's why this first budget amendment is a contingent upon a decision that will happen over in the SUA when we get to that meeting. So if we had had the ability to go in the order that we needed to for the kind of the flow to be a little bit better, if you will, we would have met SUA first. The trustees would have acted on the resolution to retain the excess transfer in the general fund. Then we would have gone to the council meeting and talked about the 2 budget amendments that we're going to discuss here in a few minutes. And then we would have met CETA, and the trustees there have a project that is part of this excess funds, excess transfer retainage, and so we will deal with that in CETA. But we're meeting council first tonight, and so we will do everything in council contingent upon what happens in the SUA and how the trustees act on that particular request. So with all of that in place, we are now going to talk about the budget amendment transferring $350,000 from the general fund to Stillwater Economic Development Authority to fund the redevelopment agreement with Everyman LLC and its partner company, Just the Letter J and LLC, Just the Letter J Capital LLC. And this is that development agreement that you authorized staff to pursue with Everyman LLC. This $350,000 is considered excess transfer from the SUA, and so if you approve the budget amendment this evening, it will be contingent on the action taken over in the SUA. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilors? How does Melissa, how does this money get back to the general fund?
So once this money gets over into the SUA, the trustees are going to, in essence, seed that money into TIF number 3, which is our Downtown Campus Link project. And at that point, that fund will issue a note, or CETA will issue a note back to the general fund. The terms of this note are 15-year note with a 1.75 interest rate. The payments on that note will be made out of the ad valorem collections out of TIF number 3. And if it can be paid off sooner, it will be paid off sooner. So the general fund will be made whole. It just may take a while.
Plus 1.75% interest.
Correct, which works out over 15 years to be about $50,000. And it is, at this point, a great deal better than we're getting at our local institutions.
And that TIF, just for a TIF refresher, that money that the TIF will pay back to the city comes out of the new tax revenue that is generated once this building's value is improved by this project.
That is correct. That is the increment.
So the money is actually coming ultimately from new ad valorem tax revenue that only exists if this project improves the property to a point where its assessed value goes up substantially.
That is correct.
Okay. Councilors, any further questions on this? Do we have a motion on the budget amendment?
Motion to approve the budget amendment, transferring $350,000 from the general fund to CETA to fund the redevelopment agreement with Everyman LLC, contingent upon approval of the redevelopment agreement by CETA trustees and adoption of resolution CC 2020-22, which authorizes the retention of excess Stillwater Utilities Authority transfer in the general fund for specific projects.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this budget amendment. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Darlington,
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti,
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake,
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that budget amendment is approved. Melissa, I'm sure we'll be hearing from you more in a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Item 8C is approve recommendations to upgrade core components of the city's information technology network infrastructure and authorize the total project expenditure not to exceed $300,000. Brad Stewart, I assume, is joining us online. There he is. Very fitting that you join us online, Brad.
Yeah, I'm upstairs in my office, just FYI, but I thought this might be the best way to join. Good evening, councilors. Brad Stewart, Information Technology Director. I'm here this evening to ask for your approval for the replacement of some aging core components in our city's networking infrastructure. These items have been included in our capital improvement plan forecast the last few years, with this fiscal year in mind for the project to actually occur. This project was included in the IT budget for this current fiscal year. And specifically, this project replaces approximately 30 network switches, both core switches in our data center and departmental switches across the entire network. Also scheduled to be replaced are some back-end hardware and software on our city's voice over IP or VoIP telephone system. That includes 3 VoIP gateway router appliances, 3 analog to digital router appliances, and 10 virtual servers controlling various aspects of our phone system. Finally, this project includes replacing our primary firewall device, which is a key piece in our overall network security. The hardware that's under consideration is approaching 8 years in service, and several of the components will actually be reaching end of support from the manufacturer in 2021. Unsupported equipment leaves the city in a more vulnerable position. Failed components would not be repaired or replaced by the manufacturer. Software and firmware updates would no longer be made available from the manufacturer, which could lead to some security risks if newly discovered vulnerabilities aren't being addressed and they're not pushing out those security patches for us. So for the last few months, IT staff has been researching and evaluating options for these needed upgrades. Staff met with several vendors and requested proposals for replacing network switches, upgrading cabling between the switches, replacing the VoIP telephone system equipment, and replacing the primary firewall appliance. Proposals and estimates were received, and those proposals also included any necessary services to complete those upgrades. All equipment and services proposed are from existing state contracts already competitively awarded by the state of Oklahoma. Funding for this project was included in the FY 2021 capital improvement plan in the amount of $300,000, and these funds are available in the current IT budget. I'm going to share my screen real quick. You guys seeing that?
We are.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So on the screen is a table showing the estimates, who the estimates are from, and the corresponding state contract number. The estimates received for all of those component upgrades total $257,000, which is well within the budgeted project amount. So I do have a recommendation, but I'd be happy to stop now and answer any questions.
Counselors?
Sounds super important to do.
They're needed upgrades, and we will see a lot of benefit from them.
Good.
Brad, why don't you go ahead and give us your recommendation?
Great. So I'm requesting a motion to approve staff's recommendation to upgrade core components of the city's network infrastructure and to authorize total project expenditures not to exceed $300,000, which does include a 15% contingency above the received proposals and estimates.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate the very clear and thorough presentation on the item. It's very helpful to get all that information out there and see it very clearly, so we appreciate that. Councilors, any further questions or motion on this item?
Motion to approve staff's recommendation. You want the whole thing? Just off the cuff?
Good. I think we got it.
You're all right.
Did I hear a second?
Yes, second.
All right, we have a motion from the Vice Mayor and a second from Councilor Jaloski. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington?
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti?
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake?
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that project is approved. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate all your work on the IT side. Just as an aside, you guys have had an extra special job here over the last few months with meetings online and all the other stuff that you've had to deal with through COVID, and we appreciate all of the extra hard work you guys have been doing.
I appreciate you saying that. These are unprecedented times, and we've been trying to do our best to keep everybody working and having meetings and all the things that go along with running a city.
It's been great.
Appreciate you mentioning.
Yeah. Have a good evening.
You too.
All right. That takes us to item 8D, our quarterly financial report from Christy Cluck.
Good evening. Christy Cluck, Finance Director, and I'm here this evening to provide an overview of our first quarter financial report for fiscal year 21. And this report is for informational purposes only, so no action is being requested tonight. And I'll start with a look at our revenues. And organization-wide, our revenues are doing well and are generally on target when taking into account seasonal activities and one-time receipts of funds, such as grant reimbursements. A couple of revenue highlights. We are at 25% of the way through the budget. And when we look at our sales and use tax combined, which makes up our largest source of revenue for our general fund, we do see that these revenues are at 24.6% of budget. So on track and doing well. In looking at the other city funds on the financial report, specifically the airport fund, we see that airport fuel sales are under budget. They're currently at about 11% of budget and are behind last year's sales by about 37%. This is somewhat to be expected because we've had a decrease in the traffic out at the airport. However, this reduction in revenue is offset by a reduction in our fuel purchases on the expenditure side. So moving on to expenditures, the spending reductions instituted in the final quarter of FY20 continue in place today across all departments. And they're in place to continue to hedge against the unknown impacts of the pandemic on our revenue streams. Because these spending reductions remain in place, our O&M expenditures are also under budget. And across the organization, they average at about 20% of budget. At the end of the first quarter, we did make the decision to release all capital projects, and staff has been authorized to proceed with procurement of those projects. And this decision was made because our revenues have consistently performed much better than expected since the beginning of the pandemic. And finally, I want to take a look at fund balance, and specifically the fund balance of the general fund. And Melissa already touched on some of this, so a little bit will be repeat, but I think it's worth repeating because it is kind of a complex topic and it will be touched on several times this evening. So I want to focus on the general fund balance because of that transfer that the general fund relies on every year to meet its expenditure needs. And that SUA transfer policy governs that transfer and stipulates that any excess transfers of funds in any given year must be returned to the SUA at the conclusion of the annual financial audit. And that is unless the SUA trustees approve alternative action. So the beginning fund balance in the general fund for FY21 was greater than what was projected when the budget was put together. And because of that stipulation, and Melissa hit on this earlier, because of that stipulation in the transfer policy, we always assume a zero balance when we're developing the budget to begin with. In actuality, our beginning balance in the general fund was $10.9 million. So of that $10.9 million, $5.6 million of that had been appropriated in FY20 for capital projects. It had just not been spent as of the close of the year. And so staff brought to the council, and council approved the reappropriation of those funds in the FY21 budget back in July. So the remaining $5.3 million represents what we're calling that excess transfer. And that really came about for two reasons. And one is we realized a savings of about $2.7 million in FY20 because of those spending reductions and because of vacancies in personnel due to just natural turnover as well as not filling some vacant positions during the pandemic. The second reason is we realized $2.6 million in CARES Act revenue in FY20 as well. And this was a reimbursement of public safety payroll expenditures. So this $5.3 million by default must go back to the SUA. But tonight we see that the council and trustees are considering alternative action for $850,000 of those excess transfers. The remaining balance of $4.3 million in excess transfers will be addressed when the audit concludes in December. And so staff will bring back a proposal at that time for those funds. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That was very thorough and helpful, and actually somewhat understandable, which is
good.
Always a surprise
goal.
when it comes to budget issues. Councilors, any questions for Christy?
Ditto what you said, Mayor. Actually, kind of understandable.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Christy, what was the budgeted amount of the transfer from SUA to the general fund for last fiscal year?
For last fiscal year, I don't know the exact number. It's usually about 14 million, between 13 and 14 million.
Okay. So basically what we're saying is we transferred that over from SUA. We didn't spend it all, so we need to transfer whatever we didn't spend back.
Correct.
Less whatever we talk about later about keeping in the general fund.
Correct, yes.
Okay. I think it's notable that, in addition to the CARES money, which is very helpful to cover a lot of these expenses, the staff and folks at the city were able to really act, I think, very responsibly to keep expenses down, to make sure with the unknowns of the pandemic at the end of last fiscal year and the beginning of this fiscal year to put us in a situation where we're not having to scramble, we're not having to panic. We're certainly still wary of what numbers are going to look like. I know this fall, as we go deeper into this, I expect that we'll see lower than expected sales tax revenue going forward. But it is very heartening to hear that through staff's hard work and I think good decision making, we're in a position that we're able to weather that and not not be panicking at this point, even though, we're seeing those reductions right now. So kudos to Mr. McNichol and to everyone, to all the finance staff for sure, and everyone at the city who's worked extra hard with less resources to make sure that the city is in a stable financial condition when that is not the case in many other places right now.
Mayor, if I may have one comment. I'm very appreciative of staff for going along with what seemed to be some draconian measures. And the other thing that I would like to say is that this report is kind of timely in light of some information that's being circulated in some parts of the community that the city's deeply in the red. We are not deeply in the red. In fact, the matter is we are far from it, and that is, again, because of the hard work of very dedicated staff. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Councilors, any further questions or comments on this item? All right. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you.
Next up is item 8E, an overview of proposed amendments to Chapter 37, Section 37-101, Standard Permit Conditions by advancement of Ordinance 3459. So this ordinance is on the agenda later on, but Mr. Carnes, Monty Carnes, is here to talk to us a little bit about what these amendments will do.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Monty Carnes, Director of City Engineering. A little background. In the summer of 2018, we began to have issues with people just showing up and working in the public right-of-way, which we knew nothing what was going on, causing numerous issues. We didn't have the right separation of utilities. Street lanes would be closed without a process approval going through. We'd get complaints from citizens. So Ordinance 3408 was presented to you to amend the development sections to create the public way permit. And as with all kind of new ordinances, sometimes you have to tweak them as time goes on and you've lived with them a while. So that's what we're here to tonight, is to kind of tweak the ordinance. We've worked with the development community on the language. We apologize that the proposed ordinance that was in your package and then for public was the draft and not the final, and that contained language that has since been removed. Primarily that language dealt with extending the public way permit to property that would eventually become public, but basically was still under the developer's control. We have had instances where we have tried to work with developers and even engage their professional staff and still have not been successful. So we feel like that this is a necessary tweaking of the ordinance. Unrelated, well, related to this, but not part of your decision tonight, is we've also identified another issue, and that's that in some instances there isn't anyone on site as a project manager or superintendent with authority, or maybe not even in town and regional. So we're going to handle that issue with the development standards, and we're going to put a clause in there that says there has to be somebody available at all times that's authorized to make decisions. We think between those two things, between this and that, we will close a pretty big loophole. The proposed tweaks or changes change the timeline for restoration of private property, expand the notification requirements, give specific responsibilities to the permit holder, and a process of notification for extension of work if unforeseen situations happen. The penalties in the ordinance will be to the permit holder. We believe that that's the proper place for it to be, because that would be the person most accountable, and keeps good accountability. We have had some concerns that the city should abide by the same provisions. I will tell you that in our contract work, city engineering, for several years, we've required greater notice than what this is giving. And we've also begun limiting how long driveways and sidewalks can be closed before they're restored, which again is a tighter timeline that we have in this proposed ordinance. So we believe we are meeting the intent as a city as well. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Monty. Councilors, any questions? Is there a motion? I guess, well, no, never mind. This was just a report. We're going to get to this ordinance in a second. Thank you, Monty, for the explanations on this. All right. That takes us to item 8F, approve budget amendment allocating funds for a Chamber of Commerce and City of Stillwater Small Business Grant Program contingent upon the adoption of Resolution CC-20-22, which authorizes retention of excess transfer in the general fund. So, Melissa, what else are we going to do with this money that we might keep out of the transfer back?
Well, so we have some exciting opportunity here to speak to the public comment we received this evening. We do realize that there are lots of our small business owners that are struggling, and especially if you opened a business during the pandemic, I think that would be starting with kind of an axe hanging over your head in some regards. That would be very, very difficult. So one of the solutions that has been developed is to create a small business grant program to be run jointly between the City of Stillwater and the Stillwater Chamber of Commerce. The ordinance, or the budget amendment this evening will allocate funds in the total of $500,000 to those grants, and these are grants that would be taxable to the recipient. And then by resolution, you will create, and the resolution's down here in item 9B, that resolution will create the small business grant program. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the grant program itself. If you want to wait for that until we get to the resolution, that's fine. But really what I need action from from the council this evening is on allocating those excess funds contingent upon what decision you as trustees make in the SUA meeting.
Thank you, Melissa. Councilors?
I'm happy that we're going to be able to provide this to our small business owners. I really am. It's quite a tough story to hear, and this is what we can do. There's not other things we can do, bring back whatever, but this is something we can do, and I'm happy to be partnering in this program, and happy to make a motion if you're ready.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask real quick, Melissa, so the funding for this, as Christy said in the financial report, part of this is available because we got CARES Act money to replace some of our other costs associated with the pandemic. So this funding is available mainly because we got that CARES Act to cover other expenses. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Vice Mayor, did you have a motion?
Sure. Motion to adopt the Small Business Grant Program by approval of a budget amendment appropriating $500,000 for the program, contingent on the adoption of Resolution CC 2020-22, which authorizes the retention of excess Stillwater Utilities Authority transfer in the general fund for special project.
Second.
We have a motion from the Vice Mayor and a second from Councilor Zanotti. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington?
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti?
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake?
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that budget amendment is approved, contingent on those stated contingencies. Thank you, Melissa. All right. Item 8G is COVID-19 update. I don't have a whole lot to say at this point in the COVID-19 update. Our overall case numbers continue to improve somewhat, although we've had some intermittent spikes in our hospitalizations, and we're still certainly seeing complications there. And so it continues to be incredibly important for all of our community to take the precautions that we've been discussing for months now to continue to see improvement in these numbers. I would also note that as far as of earlier this afternoon, the Payne County Health Department still had some spots available for tomorrow's drive-through flu shots, which is a really important thing as well to help protect the healthcare system at this time. So I don't know if you can call them in the morning or not, but if you get a chance to give the Payne County Health Department a call tomorrow, you can get a free drive-through flu shot. I'm sure they'll be doing some more of that as we go forward. I would just say thank you again to Stillwater Medical Center, the work that they've been doing over there. Like I said, they've had days of more than a dozen patients at a time here in the last couple of weeks. Several folks in the ICU as well, and so they have been working very hard to help keep our community safe and keep people healthy. And we need to do our part to help them as well by continuing to wear a mask, wash our hands, keep our distance, and avoid those risky situations. Councilors, any further comments on COVID-19? All right.
Mayor, I worry a little bit that as we get closer to holidays and missing our families and somewhat of a complacence about the seriousness of the situation, that we gather, we don't wear masks, and just hope that everyone remembers that this is still a serious time, and keeping distance and not being in large gatherings, particularly inside, and wearing masks is really crucial.
Absolutely. Just since you brought up holidays, I've gotten a few questions about Halloween. Halloween, trick or treating is not something that's either put on or sanctioned in any way by the city, and so we don't have. We're not saying you can or you can't, but I have seen some recommendations out there. I'll ask staff actually to see if we can get some recommendations I've seen from CDC and other places just about how to trick or treat safely and that sort of thing. We certainly want people to do that. There is no action the city takes one way or the other when it comes to trick or treating, so I don't expect anything there. But we can put out some tips and safety tips for folks who are going to partake there, and we certainly would hope that you will take those precautions that you can to keep people safe during trick-or-treating. And then, like you said, Vice Mayor, with Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays and other winter holidays coming up, we do need to make sure we're doing what we can to keep this virus under control, or to get it under control, which it's certainly not at this point. All right. That takes us down to item 9, resolutions. First up, we have Resolution 2020-20, which is a resolution authorizing the mayor of the city of Stillwater, Oklahoma, to sign and issue an election proclamation calling for a general election and a runoff election if needed in the city of Stillwater. This is a resolution to set an election date for seat 4, which is currently occupied by Vice Mayor Darlington. The election date would be February 9, 2021. The filing period would start December 7th of 2020 and run through December 9th of 2020. And that's all I have. Any questions or comments on this resolution? Or motions?
Motion to adopt resolution 2020-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington?
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti?
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake?
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote
If
of
I
5
say
to...
no, Pat will stay. Can
I'm
I
sorry?
protest that way?
I didn't get to...
Thank you, Amy.
Okay, that's a vote of 5-0 to approve Resolution 2020-20. Again, the election date would be February 9th, 2021, with a runoff if needed on April 6th, and the filing period would be December 7th through December 9th. All right. Item 9B, Resolution 2020-21, a resolution authorizing the creation of a grant program to assist small businesses with COVID-19 updates. So we've discussed this a bit. This program would be administered by the Chamber of Commerce, correct?
Administered by the Chamber and basically reviewed and funded through the city. I think it also needs a name, if I'm not mistaken. Did you settle on anything yet, Melissa?
Our marketing staff came up with the name Stay Open Stillwater, which I think is appropriate to the goal of this program. But we are open to suggestions.
Is it coincidence that the abbreviation of that is SOS? If not, it's very clever.
It could be.
So, regardless of the name, the program here would provide grants of up to $5,000 for qualifying small businesses. Businesses would have to have fewer than 50 full-time equivalent employees and an annual income of less than 10 million. It would also have to provide some evidence of revenue shortfall due to COVID. I have a question about that, given the comments from tonight from a new business owner who may not have revenues from the prior year. So we would have to try to figure out some way for those types of businesses as well.
And Mayor,
Yes.
we did take that into consideration. Okay. So we only look at their the period that they have been open.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're taking that into account.
So it's possible even if they weren't open last year at this time, they still could show evidence.
They could still get some money out of the grant program as well.
Mm-hmm. Good. All right, councilors, any either objections to the name Stay Open Stillwater or alternative suggestions for this grant program?
Maybe I'm just being, I mean, I think sometimes we overthink things, and maybe it's just leaving it the same as just saying it's a small business grant relief program. I mean, it says what it is. I think when we say Stay Open Stillwater, what does that mean? What is that program? What is that? I mean, we just simply state what it is and leave it at that. That's just my 2 cents.
I don't have any objection to that. I mean, you're the small business owner of the group, or at least former small business owner of the group.
Well, I think there's so much, we've talked about how there's just so much information out there about things that are available and not available. And I just think sometimes if we try to name so many things that it just gets confusing, and sometimes just stating what it is good enough.
So small business assistance grant program?
Yes.
Do we need to add Stillwater? Should it be Stillwater Small Business? Is there any other small business
Grant program, yeah.
grants that could be confused with this one?
I think Stillwater Small Business Assistance Program sounds good.
Yep.
Just to head off any questions that are inevitably going to come from that statement, I also am a small business owner.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just that they will come in rows. So yes, I still own Stillwater Neurology.
Do you have an opinion on the name of the grant
No,
program?
I mean,
As a
I
small
think
business owner?
I think that name is fine. You know, I did have a little problem with calling it the Stillwater Business Relief Program, just because that was so similar to the Oklahoma Business Relief Program that business owners could apply for several months ago. So anything aside from that, I think is fine.
Okay. Okay. So we'll go with Stillwater Small Business Assistance Grant Program.
Or just assistance program.
Just assistance program? Okay.
Yeah.
Delete grant. Okay.
I'm running out of room on my space here, so.
Mayor, can we talk about the timing? And I don't know if we've talked, you've gone over a little bit the funding and the amount that's available and what the grants could be. I don't think I've heard us talk about what the timeline might be for the program.
Applications will be up on the website in the morning.
Yes. And so we will follow our normal payables schedule. The chamber is going to be evaluating the applications as they're received and bringing those to City Hall so that we can be entering. They're going to have to be entered into our system using our new vendor packet information. Once we get that entered, we'll create a PO to the small business owner, and we process what is in our system as of noon on Tuesday. We process those payables, and the small business owner, hopefully doing direct deposit, will see that post to their bank account on Thursday of the same week. So the time frame should be fairly quick turnaround here.
And Melissa, that
will it be rolling until the grant funds are exhausted?
That's correct. Once the $500,000 is exhausted, then that's the end of this particular phase of the program.
But there's no particular application window. They can just, the window for application will stay open until the grant.
Till the grants till the grant fund is exhausted. And visiting with Justin Mingus at the chamber, he feels this will go very quickly.
Well, and depending on, we've set aside this certain amount of money for now, not knowing truly what the need is. And so if we find that there is more need, what do we do at that point? Are we able to discuss the opportunity for putting more funds towards that, or what do we do if we find out that there truly is a need that we weren't aware of, and where do we go from there?
So Justin and I have discussed this. We're going to be tracking statistics because we do want to report back to you the results of this particular program so that you can make that informed decision. There is some speculation that this will go quickly, and I think you will see probably a request for a second tranche of funding for a the same or very similar program.
And these will be considered on a first come, first served basis.
Correct.
Right?
And there are some, if you look at the application, and I think it was included in the packet, we're trying to really target the small business owner. So if you're publicly traded, you're not part of this program. If you have more than 50 full-time employees, you're not going to be part of this program. So we're really trying to hone in on that small business owner here in Stillwater.
And $500,000 under with up to $500,000, or excuse me, with up to $5,000 per grant, that gives us 100 businesses, which both does and doesn't sound like a lot.
I guess if you're reviewing the application.
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to see. I mean, this is, I think, an attempt to help as much as we can at this point, and it's also going to be information gathering for us and try to figure out what other kinds of needs are out there and what else we might be able to do to help those. So I think it's a good first step, but it's certainly, I don't think any of us think that it is the only thing we might do. Hopefully we can see what kind of information we get and potentially do more if possible in the future.
And I think it's important to note that the application will reside on the chamber website, but we'll have a link to be able to get to that on the city's website, and you do not have to be a chamber member to apply.
Yes.
Very good point. Yes, thanks. And thank you very much to Justin and his team at the Chamber of Commerce for being willing and able to step up and help administer the program and help do the legwork of verifying applications and all that sort of thing to make sure that folks can get their applications in and done quickly. So we do appreciate their cooperation here, and I think they've been great partners throughout this. And as Norman said, you do not have to be a Chamber of Commerce member business in order to apply for these funds. That will not be taken into consideration when it comes to granting these funds.
One other criteria, though, Mayor, you do have to be located within the corporate city limits.
Yes, within the city limits of Stillwater, and the specific requirements will all be on that chamber site, assuming this resolution passes. Further questions, comments on this resolution, Council, or motions for that matter?
Motion to adopt resolution number CC 2020-21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. Teresa, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington?
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti?
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake?
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, resolution 2020-21 is adopted. And we're certainly excited about the possibility of seeing some small business assistance grants out there in our community to help those businesses. Certainly, again, the chamber and city staff have put a lot of work into trying to get this program up and running. It's for some businesses, they've been waiting for something like this, and we're glad that we're able to do it at this point. All right. Item 9C, Resolution 2020-22, which is a resolution authorizing the retention and appropriation of excess transferred Stillwater Utilities Authority funds in the City of Stillwater General Fund for specific projects. So this is the resolution that would allow the $500,000 for the grant program and the $350,000 for the TIF funding to be held back out of the return of transfer funds back to SUA. Councilors, any questions about this resolution? Is there a motion?
Motion to adopt resolution CC-2020-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce?
Yes?
Vice Mayor Darlington?
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti?
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake?
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, resolution 2020-22 is adopted. Item 9D, Resolution 2020-23, a joint resolution by the Stillwater Economic Development Authority and the Stillwater City Council approving a redevelopment agreement by and among the Stillwater Economic Development Authority, Everyman LLC, and just the letter J Capital LLC, collectively the redeveloper, and approving a covenant agreement.
This
Mr. Dorman.
Is the development agreement for the Everyman TIF project. So once this is approved, then that authorizes the city to fund the project through the TIF financing program.
Okay. Councilors, questions?
Motion to adopt Resolution 2020-23.
Not yet.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2020-23. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Darlington,
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti,
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake,
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, Resolution 2020-23 is adopted. Takes us to item 10, ordinances on first read. We have ordinance 3459, an ordinance amending the Stillwater City Code by amending Chapter 37, Streets, Sidewalks, and Other Public Places, Article 3, Utility Cuts and Driveways, Division 2, Licensing, Permitting, Insurance, and Indemnification, to amend Section 37-101, Standard Permit Conditions. This is the ordinance amendment that Monty discussed earlier. Questions, comments, or a motion?
Motion to advance ordinance 3459 to second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Darlington,
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti,
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake,
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that ordinance is moved to second reading. Item 11, reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman?
Nothing to report tonight, sir.
Mr. McNichol?
Yes, one item. And I hope that Mr. Dorman kind of follows along here in case this gets kind of complicated. The law that allows remote teleconferencing for open records required meetings, or Open Records Act required meetings.
Open Meetings Act.
Open Meetings Act. I told you need to watch what I say. Sunsets on the 15th of November, and there is no way that the legislature will be in session to reenact that. In some discussion, because this room has limited capacity in terms of being able to socially distance properly, we have worked out a way to use a meeting room at the library where there can be, council all has to be in a place where the public is invited. But there can be remote locations as long as there's staff that can be videoed and conferenced in. So we're working on a way to try to notify the public, and we will do that through our media friends when we come up with that, on how to kind of split those meetings if we know there's going to be a public hearing with a lot of interest. We're working on that at this point, but it's all dependent. When that goes into effect is dependent on whether the governor signs an extension of the emergency order that's out there. If he does not, I think it dies October 26th. And if he extends that act, which I think everybody expects him to do, it dies November 15th. So there will be more details on that coming forth as we determine how to direct people where to attend.
So when that act expires, either at the end of October or the middle of November, the council will have to meet together in the same room. We won't be able to do online meetings.
You cannot do the online meetings like you do them now, but there are provisions in the law where if the members are in locations that are accessible to the public and they are still within the city limits, that they can meet from those locations. And so the idea is that you could either split up the council and put part of them here and part of them in the library meeting room, and the public could be at either location, and as long as the public is able to participate fully, from either location, then you're in compliance with those provisions of the Act. We're also looking at maybe just having all of the council here and possibly having overflow in the meeting room. We're looking at it in some different scenarios. I have been in contact with the OAMA board, and I know Tulsa's looking at something very similar to what we're proposing. So this will obviously, it's still being fleshed out, as Norman says.
But I just want people to have advance notice. Wanted people to have advance notice that we'll be putting out information, and it may be different than what you've seen.
Well, we appreciate the information. It is disappointing and not at all surprising that the pandemic response that is expiring before the pandemic is. Unfortunately, that's something we'll just have to figure out and deal with. I'm sure our IT staff will have more fun deciding how to connect those two meetings. Thank you.
The City Council did pass a resolution last week to requesting the governor to extend the ability to have online meetings.
Can the governor do the extension of the meetings?
The governor cannot extend the law that gives us the ability to meet in this format. He does not have that ability because that law has a sunset provision that will expire on its own accord. It may be possible for the governor to make adjustments to the existing statute, but I'm being told that his staff does not believe that that's legally possible. So it's a very gray area because it depends on which emergency power that the governor exercises as to the nature and extent of the authority that he would have. But if he does pass if he continues the emergency resolution that's in place, we at least have until mid-November to continue in this format.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the work you guys are doing on figuring out what that's going to look like. All right, councilors, any miscellaneous items from you all?
No.
All right, that takes us down to item 13, which is appointments. We have a spot on the Stillwater Reinvestment Plan TIF Committee. I am going to ask to table that item. I haven't had time to get through the possibilities there to make a nomination for that one. And then on the Renewable Energy Task Force, we need to appoint a counselor to act as chair, I suppose, of the Renewable Energy Task Force. We've appointed the members, but we need a counselor to serve on that committee as well. I think Vice Mayor would be a natural choice. Any second to my nomination of the Vice Mayor to act as our now? Yeah. Vice Mayor, do you have any objection to being appointed to that position?
No, I do not.
Does anybody want to second my nomination of the Vice Mayor to the Renewable Energy Task Force?
I'll do it right now. Second. Right now.
We have a nomination and a second of Vice Mayor Darlington to the Renewable Energy Task Force. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington?
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti?
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake?
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, Vice Mayor Darlington is now appointed to the Renewable Energy Task Force. Thank you for your willingness to serve in that extra capacity.
Absolutely.
That takes us to the end of this agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn the City Council meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington?
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti?
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake?
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the Stillwater City Council meeting is now adjourned. At this time, Melissa, do you have any? Do you care which one I call next? Doesn't really matter. All right, we'll call to order at this time the Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting for October 19th, 2020. On the consent docket, we have special meeting minutes from October 5th. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the consent docket.
Second.
A motion and a second. Teresa, please call the roll.
Chair Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington?
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti?
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. Down to item 5, general orders. Authorize staff to work with GRDA in the community solar development process to include guidelines, community solar trenches, preliminary request for inclusion. Yeah, lots of stuff. I'm going to let Lauren Smith from the Utilities Authority talk to us about this item.
Good evening, trustees. Lauren Smith, Electric Utility Director. Ash Mayfield from GRDA is here to present their community solar program that they've developed. This program creates the framework for us to allow community solar in our community. And with that, Ash has a presentation. I'll let him take over the screen, and then I'll come back here at the end and kind of wrap it up.
Thank you, Lauren. Hello, Ash.
Hey, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Outstanding. I am going to attempt to share my screen here, so bear with me for just a second. Okay, can you see the slide that says GRDA's Community Solar Program?
Yes, we can.
Hey, that's a good start. Good evening, everybody. I'm Ash Mayfield. I'm Assistant General Counsel for the Grand River Dam Authority. Of course, the Grand River Dam Authority is the wholesale supplier for electrical power and energy for SUA. And we've been working on some pretty neat things here. And so I wanted to take a few minutes and talk to you about these things and try to field any questions that you might have. So first, if I can get the slides to change, we're going to talk about the Community Solar Program. Did that slide change for you?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I've got a little bit of lag on my side, but I will try to stumble through it here. Before we get into the community solar itself, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what GRDA's energy profile looked like in the year 2019. And so if you look on the left and on the lower left portions of this pie chart, you'll see a big chunk, or really two big chunks, of GRDA's energy was sourced from carbon-free generating resources. And so this is the way it was in 2019. It's the way it is today. And we get an awful lot of our energy from resources that don't emit anything altogether. The big dark blue chunk on the right-hand side is our natural gas. The medium blue on top, the 12.x%, represents market purchases, which themselves have a lot of renewables inside them, just kind of intrinsically. And I don't know if you can see it or not. There's a little sliver that's less than 1%, it's bright green, that's on the bottom. That represents the amount of energy that GRDA used to fulfill its resources that came, or fulfill its obligations that came from coal. And so this is pretty big news, right? This is certainly a picture that's worth 1,000 words that demonstrates some of the strides we're making to green up our portfolio. And to that end, this chart kind of tells the same story. You'll notice on the left-hand side of this chart, and really flowing all the way to around 2011 or so, there's an awful lot of our base load of our energy that we met using coal combustion. As time has gone on, and certainly remarkably changing in 2017, 18, and 19, you'll see more and more and more of our obligation has been met with coal and carbon-free resources. So we're excited about this. This is important to us, and it's maybe best viewed as one more step in our greening portfolio process to bring this community solar program to you. We do, as a reminder, I've visited with you guys about this before, and I know everybody loves this material. We buy our power and energy from the Southwest Power Pool. We sell our power and energy into the Southwest Power Pool. It's a marketplace that helps us get the very lowest prices and pass those prices on to our consumers. And I wanted to include some data about the energy that we get from Southwest Power Pool. This slide is a little bit smaller than I wanted it to be, but it really shows the trend that I wanted to capture. The bluish, I think that's blue, line on top, that represents the generation in the SPP footprint. Now, this is the entire SPP footprint, not just GRDA, but all of the footprint that came from coal. And it's, you can play with the math and you can talk about the numbers, but the takeaway is that coal is trending down and SPP significantly. Gas, which is the yellow or orange line in the middle, is roughly equal. I mean, maybe up, maybe down, but roughly equal. But an important thing is the green bar on the bottom, wind. Look at where wind was in 2011 compared to where it is in 2019. Was 2019. It's 2020, isn't it? SPP is greening up significantly. Gas has overtaken, wind has overtaken gas. The footprint for SPP is extraordinarily blessed in that it's a rich resource for solar and for wind. And these are the trends that are starting to appear that kind of capture that reality. Just a couple more SPP slides. I promise we'll get to the community solar stuff. I just wanted to give you some foundation here. These blue chunks on top of the red bars are SPP's calculation of basically avoided carbon emissions. And so again, you see the trend lines. As the years have gone by, the avoided carbon share has increased year over year over year. So we're moving in the right direction, and not just as GRDA, but as a power pool. One more, you don't see a lot of coal being built these days, do you? In fact, if you look at this generation interconnection queue, this is, in layman's terms, this is the hopper of generators that are waiting to hook up the electric grid. There is zero coal. There's a pretty small share of gas. Everything else, the lion's share is wind, solar, storage. And so we are very much on the right track of thinking by developing a community solar program. In SPP, SPP system-wide has a wind penetration record at the low 70%. And so that means at this interval that's on the screen, 1:56 in the morning on 4/2/2020, 72 and change percent of all the load in SPP was served using zero emissions wind energy. This is incredible, frankly. This is incredible. I remember conversations from folks who are very familiar with the industry, not all that long ago, within the last 10 years, that said this is a technical impossibility. We can never get there. The grid will be unstable if we do this. But one of the beautiful things about innovation is, and ingenuity certainly, is that we learn a way to adapt to new realities. And so this shows that GRDA is, but also SPP is getting greener and greener and greener. Importantly, you see the number at the very bottom. It's 50,000 and change megawatts. If you were outside of the utility industry, what you might say is, well, that's a gigawatt. That's not 50,000 megawatts. For some reason, utility people still refer to things in thousands of megawatts. So 50,662 megawatts is the peak load for SPP. The wind peak is 18,000 megawatts. Okay, so not quite half, right? We're getting closer. We're not quite half. But the wind peak happened at 11:13 at night, and the 50,000 and change load peak happened right in the middle of the afternoon. Why is that? Well, it's because the wind blows more and most often over time, trend-wise, at night. Wind tends to blow when the load, in a way that's not coincident with the peak load. Solar, guys, is different. Solar tends to generate more during these peak periods. And so we view solar at GRDA, and I think, actually, I know that Lauren is on the same page. We see the value of solar as a resource that peaks coincident with the rest of the system. So finally, without further ado, although all that stuff is fun, and I could talk about that all night, It is getting a little bit late, and I better get to the community solar program. We wanted to accomplish a few important things with this community solar program. Thing number one, we wanted to facilitate local construction. It's relatively easy now to source a utility scale solar facility in the hundreds of megawatt range in the western part of Oklahoma or in New Mexico. That's not what this program is about. This is about a smaller capacity solar panel facility that's built right within Stillwater and that integrates and interconnects to Stillwater's distribution system. It's about capturing economic efficiencies, because when you build small projects, you don't get the same efficiencies that you do when you build hundreds of megawatts at a time. And so what this program does is it aggregates demand from multiple customers. Lots of different cities across Oklahoma that GRDA supplies. We want to stack that demand up together. We want to get better bids from vendors, and we want to pass those savings on to our municipal customers. And the structure of this deal is designed to capture the value of the tax incentive. GRDA does not have a tax appetite, of course, being a state agency. Neither does SUA. But the deal structure here allows a third party to monetize the tax. So the benefits, local projects are more tangible and they feel more real to stakeholders than remote projects. You can have a remote project that's out in the Panhandle or out, in Weatherford, Oklahoma, and it's a completely legitimate project. It's completely feasible and it interconnects to the transmission system. But the citizens of Stillwater can't drive by and see it on a daily basis, just too far away. This is different. This is something that if somebody was so inclined, they could get in their car and drive out and take a look at the fancy new community solar project that's right there in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Like I said, it interconnects at distribution voltage with Stillwater systems, so you avoid about a 4 or 5 year delay with SPP trying to connect at the transmission voltage. It's much, much, much faster. And Stillwater, SUA, retains the ability to craft whatever retail level community solar program works for you guys. So if you want a subscription model, that's great. You want to just roll it into the rates, that's great. GRDA has built the program with as much flexibility as we can in mind. And so Stillwater would come up with how to handle that on the retail end. Last but not least, RECs, renewable energy certificates from the project, would flow to Stillwater, and Stillwater could either retain those and retire them or resell them if it was so inclined. But Stillwater gets the REC. So the general process here is that first we figure out which customers have some initial level of interest. And this is non-binding at the beginning because we want folks to throw their names in the hat if they may have interest in having a community solar project built. Based on that initial interest, we're going to get some indicative pricing. When the pricing comes back, some communities, I believe some communities are going to say, you know what, that's a little bit too expensive for what we want to do. That didn't really meet our objectives here. So thanks, GRDA, but no thanks. We don't want to proceed. Some cities are going to say, you know what, I think that we can make this work, but we can only make it work if the price range is X, right? If in this example I've got on the screen, this only makes sense to utility X if the price range is for the energy on this contract less than $60 a megawatt hour. GRDA figures out who's going to stay in the process, who's going to set these parameters, and who's going to drop out, and then we work with the vendors to firm up pricing. Let's say that you set a price of $60, a price limit of $60. If the price winds up being $55, you're automatically in. You proceed to development. If the price is more than $60, then you're automatically out and have no more obligation. So it's kind of a pick your own deal format. It lets us firm up pricing in a way that's really fair to customers and really doesn't require any binding commitment until this price range stage where you define your own price. After we get final price, and after we figure out who opts in and out, we finalize the deal, we finish up the paperwork, we conduct any necessary studies, we arrange for interconnection to the distribution system and prepare for construction. There's an awful lot that goes into that last step. Very labor intensive, very complicated, but this is really where the rubber meets the road. This is where you actually begin to see construction of these facilities locally in your communities, and when you start to benefit from that. Economics-wise, this again is on a wholesale basis, not a retail basis, but on a wholesale basis, the economics look a whole lot like a buy-all, sell-all model, the same thing that SUA does, the same structure, which is a very good rate structure to recover fixed costs at the retail level. And so that's the way that we have it structured. At the wholesale level, GRDA credits SUA for the value of the market energy based on SPP prices, and Stillwater determines how the program is structured and how the cost recovery works at the retail level. Although I talked a lot about community solar, we do also have other options on the table if communities become interested. If SUA determines that it would be in its best interest to partner with GRDA on a large utility scale project, and this is the type of project that I referred to that's maybe out in western Oklahoma. We can talk about that. The risk profile looks different on those projects, and the pricing is a little bit less. And so on the one hand, your cost of energy is lower. On the other, your risk profile is a little bit greater, and you have transmission risk and delivery risk. So we want to be accused at GRDA of everything but intransigence. We want to be the most creative, most thoughtful, most responsive provider out there. And so if you're interested in something like this, certainly let us know, and we'll have some good conversations about it and try to make it go. Before I get into the distributed generation stuff, do we have any questions in particular about community solar?
Ash, just to help me in my head, when you say customer, you're talking about your initial offer to customers would be an aggregate of Stillwater and Perkins and Morrison. That's the level of customer that you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So GRDA supplies wholesale energy to many cities. And so the idea is that we would talk to all of our cities and say, hey, are you guys interested in participating in this community solar development tranche? And the folks that are, how much? How big of a project are you looking at? Where would you like to put it? And kind of get the particulars nailed down. So the customers to be included in the bid, they would be the GRDA wholesale customer. The idea being that the bigger aggregate project that you get, the more it's going to drive those costs down and lower the overall energy costs for the deal.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I'll quickly address the DG rider, and if anybody thinks of additional questions, then we can try to field those. That's one of my favorite things about coming to Stillwater is I always get the best questions here.
I have a long list.
Hey, there you go. I think last time I told you it's complicated. This is complicated.
Yeah.
So for GRDA's distributed generation rider, we wanted to, again, make some improvements that make this process more friendly, allow more flexibility for our wholesale customers like SUA. The current version of the policy says that as long as your distributed generation, the aggregate total of your DG is less than 100 kW, so you add up all your rooftop solar on your system, if it is less than 100 kW, there is no make-whole obligation from SUA to GRDA. So you're financially indifferent. Everything above 100 kW, there's a make-whole obligation for. I think that's a good policy. It was well-intentioned, and it accomplished the things that we wanted it to accomplish. It prevented customer excuse me, subsidization and accomplish some other things. But we got some feedback from customers that 100 kW threshold may be too low. And so what we did was increase the threshold from 100 kW to 1,000 kW, aggregate nameplate capacity before a make-whole payment kicks in. And so 1,000 kW is a whole lot more rooftop solar before it begins to impact your GRDA wholesale bill. Now, it can still impact the retail bill. That's not what this is about. This is just kind of about the wholesale relationship between GRDA and SUA. And so we're going from 100 kW in total, the threshold, to 1,000 in total, or a single installation of 100 kW or bigger. That's guys, that's a big community and solar installation. That's bigger than what you could fit on your roof, unless you have a really, really big roof. This is really a change that affects the relationship between SUA and GRDA and provides SUA more tools. And so it doesn't have a lot of direct applicability to this council, but I think it's important that you guys stay in the loop and understand these policy initiatives that GRDA is working on. We want to continue to be flexible and respond to customer needs and make policies that make sense for our customers. And I jumped the gun on that. I wanted to say we're going to continue to evolve these. This is not a destination. This is a beginning point, and we want to make these processes better and better and continue to provide more value as we go. Now we have the official question slide, so maybe there's some great questions here.
Vice Chair Darlington, you want to start?
Oh, actually, these are questions that people sent to me.
Okay.
So I can't take credit for them.
You can't, or you don't want to.
Oh, I'd love to. I love to ask questions. You know that. What are the parameters that will be used for and these questions might be a little bit a cart before the horse, given the point of the presentation today. What are the parameters that will be used for determining the power capacity of a community solar plant besides available real estate?
Sure. So you can, as just a ballpark figure, it's kind of a ballpark figure in where we are in Oklahoma and based on where Stillwater is, the capacity factor for the project is going to be around 20%. That's what I would estimate to be around 20%. And so what that means is if you have a 1 megawatt plant that operates all day, every day at full output at a megawatt, there's 8,760 hours in the year. And so you'll have 8,760 megawatt hours produced from that plant in a year. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Of course, everybody knows that you don't need to be a lawyer, certainly, to know that solar doesn't shine in the nighttime, and so you're not going to get production in the nighttime hours. You're going to get about 20% of that 8,760 hours in which the solar production happens, and happens in meaningful out quantity. So you're going to have a lot less energy than what you might from a thermal plant. The trade-off is that it's zero emission. It's not just zero carbon emission, it's zero emission of any kind. And so it's much cleaner. There's no fuel. There's no fuel delivery. There's no fuel emissions. But you do not get the same level of output that you do from, for example, the Stillwater Energy Center.
Mm-hmm.
If I might add a little bit to that, Ash.
Yes, sir.
I think the bottom line as to how much we can put in is really land related, because we are really land limited. We did a pretty exhaustive search inside the city limits, and we've identified, my next slide that I'm going to show when Ash gets done will make reference to that. We've identified land at the Energy Center, about 12 acres that could be made available, and we think that's going to be about 1.5 megawatts or a little more. We've we identified some land at the airport, but there was lots of FAA restrictions that we were going to have the hoops jump through when you start dealing with the FAA. So we kind of put that way on the back burner to say we'll use that as a last-ditch effort. And actually last Thursday, I was made aware of some land that could potentially be used, about 13 acres, which is another couple of megawatts or more. So really, just, these, it's interesting. It takes about, estimate hip shot about 6 acres for 1 megawatt of solar. So it's really land intensive, and we run into those problems in town.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
I hope that answered your question a little more.
Yeah. What percentage of our energy usage would 1 megawatt be?
So going off of what Ash said, a 20% capacity factor, we crunched the numbers down. About 1.5 megawatts would serve about 250 of our residential customers. Our residential customers consume about 875 kilowatt hours on average per month. And so doing the math, it's 250-ish, but we have had conversations with the Renewable Energy Task Force, and some great ideas were brought up there. Again, it kind of goes back to we're just at the beginning stages of designing this program. And so what we're going to do is we run down the path here tonight, if we get approval to kind of start the non-committal stages of this. We're going to be running in parallel with the Renewable Energy Task Force and the community to start building this program. What's this program look like? All those details, and then hopefully, and I think Ash said about 6 or 8 months is what it's going to take on the GRDA side. We meet there with a recommendation that we bring back to the trustees that we fully vetted out. We've got a rate consultant that's hired that's going to help us navigate this stream to determine what's best for Stillwater and to make this work.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so I think it's important that, I don't know if I heard Ash say it, but GRDA and their flexibility, which we appreciate, they're going to allow us to do this in tranches, right? We don't have to commit today, and then, we can do this some this year, and then next year say, okay, that was a success. Let's put in more and more and more. So this is just kind of the initial stages to get our feet wet in this type of generation and programs. And what I like what Ash said is, this is really written in stone because we're trying to figure it out, And so I'm sure we're going to get better as we go down the line. But what's important is that tonight we're just asking to let us go down this path for these first 6 stages of 8 to get to a finale, non-committal. And then when we get to that point where we have everything worked out, we come back with an educated recommendation to the trustees that has been thoroughly vetted. Renewable Energy Task Force, community, customer, everybody's involved. That is what we're excited about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is exciting.
Sorry, that was a long answer to probably a very short question.
That's okay.
Any other questions?
Oh, this is kind of for Ash. Ash, your beginning slide about the percent of hydroelectric and the tiny bit of coal, et cetera, that looks fabulous. How does that compare? I mean, is there a eastern power pool and a western power pool, or how does it compare across the country?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's California ISO. There's Cal ISO, which is of course in California. There is ERCOT in Texas. There's MISO, which is kind of in the Midwest-ish. There's PJM, which is Pennsylvania. New York ISO. I'm missing one. But they all are a little bit different. SPP has by far the most wind.
Okay.
Really owing to our natural resources. I view wind as a natural resource.
Mm-hmm.
And I left it out of the presentation. But if you were to look at the map, the SPP has a map that shows wind density and it shows the SPP boundaries. And the highest level of wind density in the entire nation is kind of coincident with the SPP boundary. It's within the boundaries. Now, unfortunately, that density is not coincident with population density. So it's a challenge to get enough transmission built and enough delivery capacity to get that wind delivered to load centers. But SPP has been working on that for several years. We're getting better. We're getting less. Well, sometimes we are. Sometimes it feels like one step forward, two steps back. But SPP is going to continue to work on reducing congestion and integrating more wind. The testament, or the fact that there's ballpark 40 gigawatts of wind in the interconnection queue and another 40 gigawatts or so of solar and storage combined really tells you the direction that SPP is going in. And regardless of, even if Stillwater never got a single megawatt of community solar, I believe completely that GRDA is going to continue to green our portfolio and will, at some point in the future, have solar natively integrated into our portfolio.
Thank you.
Is that the whole list?
Oh, I think that I really might start losing people off the screen. And if I were in the room, they'd throw things at me. Oh.
I mean, we can do a filibuster if you want to. We can do that.
Well, I'm so lucky I've just been appointed to this renewable energy. I'll ask all my questions at that committee meeting.
All right.
We look forward to it.
Good.
I did have one quick question, Ash. The DG rider that's part of this, how does that, is that different than what happens now when we have distributed, because we did adopt a distributed generation policy here. How does it different if we get into community solar versus not getting into, does that make sense?
Yeah. So distributed generation is different than community solar. The easiest way to think of it is, and also our DG policy is strictly at the wholesale level. And so Stillwater manages everything at the retail level. This is just the relationship between Stillwater and GRDA. To give you some context, the power purchase contract between GRDA and Stillwater, it says that Stillwater buys all of their power. They have an obligation to buy all their power and energy from GRDA. And GRDA has an obligation to supply all the power and energy that Stillwater needs. That's really important when you're in GRDA's position and you borrow or you issue bonds for lots and lots of money to build power plants and infrastructure and stuff. You need those types of requirements in place. But there was some concern, or at least some thought about, well, does that technically cause Stillwater or a similar customer to be in default of the contract if somebody puts rooftop solar on their house and then Stillwater buys that electricity from the customer? Is that technically a breach of the contract? And so in the first policy, the first DG policy we did back in 2018, we wanted to say, no, that you're fine. That's not a breach of contract. You're okay. And in fact, there's not even a financial implication of that until you get above that 100 kW threshold. So that's how that came about. This is more the same. It's not a breach of the contract, fine, and there's no financial obligation until you get above the new threshold, the bigger.
So it's just in here because it would mirror the similar rider that is in our other wholesale contract. This one just applies to the solar versus the other types that we're buying from y'all.
Well, it's in here because we took the action at the same time, or we're taking this action at the same time. We could have easily done community solar separate from DG, but we just did it at the same time. So I'm talking about it at the same time.
Okay.
A little bit confusing, perhaps.
So the DG policy you're talking about here applies to us regardless of whether there's community solar involved.
That's right. That's
okay.
right.
All right. That I think answers my question. I was just wondering why it was tied to community solar, but it's not. It's an independent.
It's not.
I got you.
Yeah.
Well, along those lines then, Lauren, how close are we to hitting those thresholds currently?
We've got 11, going on 11 DG customers right now. And every year we put a list together, send to GRDA what our capacity is. We're probably 60 kW of the 100 that they have now, but we're nowhere near that 1,000. That was set up there high enough for us to allow for a lot more. So we weren't close to hitting our 100 kW limit. Certainly now we're not down, so we're in good shape.
What's the biggest one we have individually? Do
you know? They're hate to be quoted because I don't have them in front of me, but typically they're 10 kW or less.
Okay.
So 5, 6 kW, stuff like that. But it's important to note too, DG doesn't just mean solar, it means wind as well. We have one customer that does have a wind, and so it's considered DG as well.
Thank you. What next?
I have a motion. If you don't have any other questions, I would certainly support if you have questions. Sometimes it's better for us if you can send them to us so we can really get quality answers before maybe our next meeting. We would certainly appreciate that because it gives us time to give exactly the information. Good. But I do have a motion. If you'd like me to read it.
Let's hear it.
Okay, motion to authorize staff to work with GRDA to complete the first 6 stages listed in this report related to community solar.
Trustees?
So move. Accept the staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the staff recommendation on this item. Teresa, please call the roll.
Chair Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that item is approved, and we look forward to the output of those conversations. Ash, we really appreciate you being here again and giving us that breakdown. It's great to see how much progress GRDA has made and the SPP have made towards greener energy for our city and our region, and looking forward to figuring out if we can be a bigger part of it.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
That will take us down to reports from officers and board. No, it doesn't. It takes us to the resolutions. I'm going to skip the most important thing that you guys wanted us to talk about. All right. Resolution SUA-2020-7 is a resolution authorizing the retention and appropriation of excess transferred Stillwater Utilities Authority funds in the City of Stillwater General Fund for specific projects. This has, I think, been thoroughly discussed to this point. Trustees, any questions, comments, or a motion on this resolution?
Motion to adopt resolution number SUA 2020-7.
Second.
We have a motion and multiple seconds. Teresa, please call the roll.
Chair Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake, Trustee Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that resolution is adopted. Now reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman?
Nothing to report, sir.
Mr. McNichol?
I do have one item, Mayor. Can you imagine a day without water?
No.
October 21st is the National Day of Action to do just that. This year, we are facing an enormous public health crisis from the coronavirus pandemic. This crisis demonstrates the critical role that water and wastewater systems play in our communities, protecting public health, safeguarding the environment, and making a healthy economy possible. Imagine a day without water is a day to pause and reflect on the impact water systems have in our lives and communities, and a day for us to commit to ensuring a sustainable water future for generations to come.
So we're not using water on October 21st? Is that?
Well, I think that they just want you to think about what it would be like not to have it. And I think that I think of our forward-thinking water engineering department that presented a report here a couple of weeks ago to ensure that we have sustainable supplies of water here in Stillwater for the future.
Absolutely.
So
I would suggest you think about what it would be like without water while you're washing your hands. Just to throw that out there. Don't stop washing your hands on.
It's a good point. Good point. All right. Thank you, Norman. That's a good reminder. Trustees, anything from you all?
No.
Is there a motion to adjourn the SUA?
Motion to adjourn the SUA.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Teresa, please call the roll. Yes?
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake,
Yes.
and Trustee Jaloski.
Yes.
We have, on a vote of 5-0, the SUA is now adjourned. All right, at this time, I will call to order the Stillwater Economic Development Authority meeting for October 19th, 2020. On this meeting, we have a consent docket, including special meeting minutes and release of a real estate mortgage. Councilors, questions, comments, or motion on the consent docket?
Motion to approve the consent docket?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Teresa, please call the roll.
Chair Joyce,
Yes?
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. On item 5, general orders, approve the development agreement between CETA and Everyman and the associated budget amendments. Melissa, you have some further discussion on this?
Just to make you aware of some of the details of that development agreement, the redeveloper agrees to undertake the design, construction, and completion of the redevelopment of the specified property. And in exchange for that, CETA agrees to provide the $350,000 in development assistant financing. CETA, through our work with the Center for Economic Development Law, has built protections into the development agreement to ensure that if that the city would be protected, the general fund would be protected in the event of some sort of breach of contract or failure to perform. And so we're just here this evening asking you to recommit. You've already approved the development agreement on the council side, the city side, and asking you to recommit that here on the CETA side as well.
Thank you, Melissa. Trustees, any questions?
No.
I would just, to clarify, some of those fail-safes here include the minimum tax payments
Yes.
that would be made. So, there's a minimum.
We've got
amount of
liability
property tax.
insurance requirements, minimum tax payments, prohibition against the transfer of the property without CETA approval, property sale restrictions, non-discrimination covenants, and maintenance covenants. So in trying to protect the city and CETA, we are protecting our investment or trying to ensure that that asset is taken care of.
Okay. Is there, I guess, a motion to approve the development agreement? Sorry, I lost my place for a second there.
Motion to enter into the proposed redevelopment agreement between CETA, Everyman LLC, and Just Letter J Capital LLC, and to approve the associated budget amendments.
Second.
Just to clarify, there is a resolution later on the agenda that
No.
The motion's fine the way she went ahead and stated it.
Okay.
You're just going to be approving the agreement twice,
Okay.
basically.
Yeah.
and this one includes the budget amendments as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
That reflects the activity on the CETA side.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second to approve the agreement and the associated budget amendments. Teresa, can you please call the roll?
Chair Joyce,
Yes?
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the agreement and budget amendments are approved. Item 5B is approve amendments to the Stillwater Reinvestment Plan Implementation Policy Committee Policy Guide, the Small Business Enhancement section. Melissa, you want to chat with us about this one?
Yes, so the Implementation Policy Committee met this afternoon, and they focused in on the small business enhancement portion of the development financing. And the chairman of the committee, Jeremy Bale, is here this evening, and he will be presenting those recommendations for amendment to the plan.
Thanks for being here tonight, Jeremy, and sitting through that SUA presentation. That must have been exciting for you.
It's fascinating. It's interesting stuff there. Councilor Darlington's got her work cut out for her on questions and what's coming from that, so it should be interesting. Thank you, Mayor and councilors.
What's that?
Jeremy, you just send me your questions.
Very good. I'll send them your way. So we met today as the Citizen Implementation Review Committee on the TIF District 3. Specifically, there's some good language there already. It just wasn't fully hashed out as to the comfort, I guess, of the review committee. And so we wanted to take a closer look at that, as there has been one application submitted already. And I'll mention that as well. And we know of other applications that are looking at this specific funding category. There are 4 items that, when you look at your agenda item here, that we're recommending stay as they are. They're adequate. The applicants must be retail, restaurant, personal service, business eligible to apply for this opportunity. Types of improvement eligible for reimbursement contained within the document. We felt like that was adequate. It really well categorized many things that could be accomplished, both short-term and longer-term. The grant to match percentage not to exceed 50% of the project, and that not to exceed a total of $15,000 per project. All of those items we felt were adequate. The number of items that we felt were not, that we would like to put up for consideration for amendment, is the financing assistant is a grant with no expectation of repayment. So unlike 2 of the other categories, they're large enough projects that repayment would come over a number of years, like we saw with the previous project, through ad valorem taxes and some incremental sales tax increases. We wouldn't expect that to be the case here, at least not in any traceable way. So this is really honing in on a couple of the items from the original objectives, which is a beautification of our city, a walkability and an appearance that we would have as a citizenship in participating and enjoying these properties. $150,000 total budget. It's a small business enhancements to be allocated over the first 3 fiscal years, or the next 3 fiscal years. And that is considered as part of the $5 million development financing in the budget already. And what we're going for there is really to segment out a portion that could be allocated, because we could see these funds start to go real quickly if business owners realize this is a good opportunity to improve their businesses. And we didn't want that to overrun any portion of that in a greater or quicker pace than what we felt like was reasonable or would pay off good dividends for the community. So the $150,000 is a good amount that we felt like we could approach. It's also in line with dollars that are currently available in the TIF available dollars. And so we won't have to borrow against that, not being something that is a repayment. It isn't something that we're as interested to borrow against like we're doing with the larger option that we just reviewed. Along with that $150,000 total budget, that up to $50,000 per fiscal year 21, 22, and 23 be the cap, if you will, per year. And again, just to stretch that out so it doesn't all go in the first year. We'll stretch that out over 3 years. Any small business enhancement funds not awarded will be rolled over to future years. We may just not have enough applications, or they don't meet the objections or objectives as well as we would like them to as a committee or as a community. Applications for small business enhancements will be accepted biannually. So among our conversation today was how do we review these? How do we know if one is better than the other, especially in an intermittent process in which they might get brought in? We thought, well, it could be good to follow a traditional, more government, I guess, grant program, which would be annually, but that didn't give us enough opportunities to review if somebody had a more near-term need that they might be looking at. So a biannual review felt good to us, and we looked at an April 1 and an October 1 as far as a submission date for those. We would then review those as quickly as possible after that and take action on all of them as a group to determine if any would be awarded or recommendations for awards would take place. Projects would be tracked based on the address of the subject property. The lessees and owners should file jointly, we feel like, and the limit one grant award per address, per lessee or owner, per the life of the TIF. So there's a lot in that. What we're going for is honestly just to safeguard the community's dollars, that reduce the likelihood of abuse or the potential of a repetitive use of a business or an owner, and too much of those dollars moving in one direction. And we felt like that was a way to manage that well without limiting, especially the business owners and real estate owners, if they have multiple lessees over a period of years, that they could have another application come in if the lessee were to change along the way and the business were to change as a result of their business as well. And that opened the door to the next lessee also having an opportunity if this was still in existence in that case. If it's owner occupied, then that would be a one-time opportunity and they wouldn't have another opportunity for the life of the TIF. It's a little confusing. One more, and then we'll have some questions if there are any. The award doesn't have to be the amount requested. So to reserve the right of the committee to award or recommend an award of less than requested based on, again, the opinions of the committee on how well that application met the obligations of the plan. Any questions on those items for amendment?
The last one confuses me just a little bit. So are you saying that they could come in and request $20,000, but you could award them $30,000?
Sure. So let's use your example. If someone were to request $20,000, there's a maximum of 15 for that project. So they would cap at 50% or 15, the greater of. And what we are saying is that we may look at their project and determine that it does not meet the plan obligations as well as we would like it to, or in comparison to other projects, and we would award them a lesser amount than is asked for or even allowed within the 50% or $15,000 maximum. So in this instance, we might award them $5,000.
Gotcha. Sorry, I used a bad number there.
That's okay. That's okay. It created a somewhat interesting case to work through.
Is it capped at the amount requested, though? And could the committee say, well, you only asked for 6,000, but we think we're going to give you 10?
We didn't talk about that, but I suppose, given the language here, it could work both ways.
I guess that's what that's more what I was asking, and I was wondering, based on the application, how the committee would be prepared to make that decision.
I would say based on our conversations so far that we would rely on staff to have held a lot of those conversations ahead of time with the applicant to make sure that they are submitting a request in line with what they need so that we wouldn't have to be in that position.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I think it makes sense for the committee to have discretion really one way or the other, because part of that conversation could show something else that could be done, or changes that could be made after the application that the committee could decide, well, we want to make that change and make this different award. So I mean, the discretion makes sense to me one way or the other, the way it's worded in here.
I just didn't know if it would open the committee up to making decisions that didn't right? Because if you're coming in with an application and you're saying, I have a facade improvement that's going to cost X amount of dollars, I would expect that would have been researched or something, right? But it seems like it would be hard, or that the committee might have, I don't know, puts them maybe in a difficult spot if they're just at a discretion to say, well, don't like that. I don't know. I wonder, I worry for the committee in that situation, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Making sure that they're.
I think that's warranted. Certainly, the approach that I think we would take as a committee would be to push that back to staff and ask them to communicate with the applicant again and update their application and resubmit with the information that we're asking for, so that we, again, making that judgment call. There's a lot of subjectivity in this already, and making that judgment call will be really difficult when you get into the dollars and cents of how much does the project cost and who's the expert here. So we would really rely heavily on staff to go back to an applicant, have those things updated, and then resubmit for review.
Yeah, I like that. I think that helps just protect the committee from any undue, I don't know, commentary about the decisions or recommendations that you're making, and it keeps it tracked, I suppose, if they're resubmitting information. And I want to say that I appreciate your guys' thought and effort and foresight in being flexible as we work through this. I think that's so very important to maximize what our community can get out of this. But I just want to make sure you guys are protected in the process.
Thank you. The committee has been really wonderful to work with. They're very thoughtful. I will add a little plug here. We are short a chair at the moment, so we're looking for someone to fill that spot, as discussed earlier and tabled. But if there's anybody of interest, we're certainly, you could notify Melissa and she could get you the right spot. But we're looking for somebody to come in and be a part of that group. It's really good dialogue, and I think we've done a good job as a committee of getting to where we are.
Are these requests, once the committee decides on it, does it come back to us for final approval? The committee makes a recommendation on these awards, and then it comes to council, right? That's the, okay. So that takes care of some of that concern that you were discussing, Trustee Jaloski, because the council would then have the opportunity to check on it, or, to take that obligation on to make the final decision on the award. So, all right. Further questions? Is there a motion to adopt or not to adopt these amendments?
Motion to adopt the amendments to the implementation policy guide as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt these proposed amendments. Teresa, please call the roll.
Chair Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington?
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti?
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake?
Yes.
Trustee Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, those amendments to the reinvestment plan are adopted. That takes us to item 6, resolutions. Resolution CETA 2020-3, which is the formal, resolution adopting the what's it called? The redevelopment agreement for Everyman LLC. Is there a motion on this item?
Motion to adopt resolution CETA 2020-3.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution. Teresa, please call the roll.
Chair Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington?
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti?
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake?
Yes.
Trustee Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, resolution CETA 2020-3 is adopted. Reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman.
Nothing to report, sir.
Mr. McNichol.
Nothing to report.
Trustees. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mm-hmm. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
That's a motion and a second. Teresa, please call the roll.
Chair Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington?
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti?
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake?
Yes.
Trustee Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, CETA is now adjourned. That concludes our meetings for the evening. Thank you all for being here.